Oh, hi there. I didn't see you. Welcome to week 4 of Intro to Android Development. We're so happy that you're still here with us, learning how to become an Android developer. You guys have done great this far, and you've already created some excellent apps. Congratulations. So, this week we're going to be talking about a topic called Recyclerviews. And it will be a little bit more on the difficult side, so I will ask that I will be trying to reiterate things as much as possible. I'm hoping it'll be fun. This is one of the most interesting, although one of the more difficult topics that we have. And of course, if you ever have any issues, do let us know. Okay, and this applies for one-on-ones as well. So if it's 10 o'clock, the homework is due at midnight, you're thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? This is hopeless. Reach out. Maybe we can help you in those hours leading up to the deadline, because sometimes you never know who's available when and whatnot, and we're always trying to be here for you when we can. So give us a little ding on Slack, and we'll reach out as we can. Okay, a couple announcements. We're going to be starting something where if for all the points that you had lost on an assignment, you can gain half back now with a sort of correction system. So, and if you don't know what to do, if you're like, I lost points and I still have no idea what to do, schedule a one-on-one with us, and we can work on figuring out the implementation holes there. So, what was it that we didn't, excuse me, that we didn't quite understand that we can understand by working together? Our ultimate goal here is to be able to learn as much as possible. The other thing is the bi-weekly feedback forms. Thank you for filling them out so far. So the second one is coming and will be due Sunday at 11:59, and along with the homework. And homework 4 is going to be very similar to homework 5. So do your best on homework 4, and you'll find that it'll be very helpful and useful in doing homework 5. So the fun fact for this week is Android versions are named after desserts. So maybe you didn't know this, but Android versions are actually named after different types of desserts like gingerbread, froyo, and Oreo, Kit Kat. And every year, what Google used to do is they used to have a little Android statue in the shape of a dessert on there. They don't really do it anymore, and now it's more of an underground thing. They don't say like new Android Kit Kat. Now they say like Android O or Android P and things like that, just because it's like more professional facing. But internally, they still call them after dessert names. But just a little fun fact. So without any further ado, we're gonna get to. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Could it be? It's... Okay, so we're going to be talking about Recyclerviews, but before we dive in, let's talk about what exactly a Recyclerview is. So, with apps, with applications, we know that lists are everywhere, right? Whether you realize it or not, underneath basically every app is a list that you're scrolling through. Think about Twitter. On your Twitter timeline, you are scrolling through a list of tweets. Through Instagram, a list of posts, right? Basically, all apps have some sort of list that you are being able to, some infinite list like Twitter, right? Where it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. So this is basically what is at the heart of something like a Recyclerview, is there is some data, and we need to have that data be some sort of scrollable series of cells, right? Where in the example of Twitter, each tweet would be one cell. Each tweet would be one item, right? And so there's a couple of different ways to implement this kind of thing. And Recyclerviews are one of the ways that we can implement it. They're a little bit more on the they have a little bit a higher, I guess what you would say, learning curve, steep learning curve. But once you learn it, it's something that will stick with you and will hopefully be something that you use in your Android development. And the reason why we teach Recyclerviews, firstly, is because we want to encourage it. Recyclerviews are industry promoted. The industry likes it a lot when people use Recyclerviews because of the reason that they are very fast. They are very fast and they are very efficient. So the reason why is because it has to do with how the Recyclerview is implemented. So let's talk a little bit about how that works. So like we said before, right, it's a series of multiple cells where each item is like one cell. Each tweet can be thought of as one item or one cell. So whatever is visible is whatever is created at runtime. So maybe on my screen I can only see 8 tweets at one time without scrolling. So at runtime, when I first launch the Twitter app, it will only create 8 tweets for me. And then as I start scrolling, then it'll start creating new tweets. Maybe it actually creates 9 so that it has the next up ready or something like that. But this is the idea that underlies how the Recyclerview is implemented, as well as many other ways of implementing these sort of lists. The rest of the list, which could be infinite, right? Especially if you have a stream coming from the internet, right? This seemingly infinite list, the rest of them will be rendered as you start scrolling. And one of the things that make Recyclerviews so special is they make use of the view holder pattern. So the view holder pattern is basically some design pattern built that the Recyclerview is built off of that avoids having to do the find view by ID call many times. Because for each cell, we don't want to constantly find view by ID. We don't want to constantly be doing this for the data, like the text view that goes into the cell. We don't want to constantly have to do it for each individual cell to put into the big list, because this is a very costly operation. It's a very expensive thing that is very slow. So for this reason, the view holder pattern is utilized, and you don't need to know exactly how the view pattern design works right now, but we will talk more about the specific nitty-gritty, and I will do my best to go as concisely as possible. But just know that the view holder pattern is key. That's what really makes the Recyclerview fast and efficient, and that's why the industry loves it. So the view holder pattern. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the different components of Recyclerviews and how we can implement Recyclerview. Okay, so next up we're going to be talking about the different components of a Recyclerview. So I'm going to sort of be iterating through this multiple times just because I know this is one of the more difficult topics. So, but I do want you to know, in terms of understanding it at an abstract level from a higher up perspective is good. If you can understand the general idea, that's the best thing you could hope for, because a lot of the code part of it is sort of boilerplate code that people generally copy-paste idiomatic chunks of code from. So the Android docs recognize this, and they give a lot of code to developers because they don't really expect developers to memorize things like this. And the textbook also has some really good example chunks of code that I recommend that you look through. So there are 6 aspects, again, 6 aspects to a Recyclerview. So the first component is likely going to be the most self-explanatory. The first component is the data. So you can't create Twitter if you don't have the tweets, right? And how do you get the tweets? Well, someone has to tweet out like the text, right? Or someone has to tweet out the image or something like this, right? So this is the data that we're inflating onto the Recyclerview. So this is the actual stuff that you're going to be looking at, right? This is known as our data set. Okay, so that's element number 1. That's the data. Component number 2 of a Recyclerview is the Recyclerview object itself, and this is what it sounds like. It's the actual object that holds the list, with the seemingly infinite list that we're talking about. It's this big, it's the big idea, right? It's this object encapsulates a lot of that. So this is the actual object. So if you want to change some element of the recycler view, you would have to call on this object and then dot whatever element you want to change, set it equal to something, things along this nature. It's like the main object that we're going to be referring to. Okay, so once again, number 1 was the data set. Number 2 was the actual recycler view object. Number 3 is going to be our layout. So what the layout is going to be describing is what is in one cell. So what describes one cell or one tweet? Maybe it's a text view, and it's also a button so that you can like the tweet. Maybe it's also a retweet button, so that would mean 2 buttons in a text view. So basically, what is the layout of this single cell? Okay, so that is the layout. It's what describes the single cell, the different views involved, right? So now we've reached that. So those are our 3 components so far of 6. Once again, number 1 is our data set. Number 2 is the recycler view object. Number 3, what is it? Number 3 is the layout. That's what describes one single cell. Okay, number 4 is our layout manager. Okay, so our layout manager is what is responsible. Its role is going to be organizing it into a single view. So maybe we are using a linear layout. Then our layout manager would be a linear layout manager. Its job would be inflating these cells into a linear layout. So it's basically the overall manager. So think about, what does a manager do in like an employment setting? What does like a software manager do? He manages all of the different software engineers. He tells them what to do, where to go, things like this. So the layout manager is basically doing this for the layouts within the grand view. So within the grand view, it's saying, hey, delegate this layout to here, and then move this layout here, move this layout here, and then this is the 4th layout, so put that at position 4. Things like this, and make sure that there's this space between every single layout. So you can sort of think about the linear layout manager as fulfilling this sort of role, like a regular manager would do. Is organizing it into the actual view. Okay, so that was number 4. That was our layout manager. Number 5 is going to be our data adapter. So our data adapter is responsible for connecting the actual data to the recycler view. So, and it's also responsible for adapting the new data as it's coming in to the new to be binded to the new cells. So as someone just tweeted out new information and we're getting the text of that tweet, we need to adapt the data to be the text of our single layout. So remember, layout describes one cell, or in this case, one tweet. So the data adapter would take the text of the tweet and adapt it to the text view portion of our layout, and then our layout manager would take that layout and put it at the top of our linear layout view. And this is all driven by the data that some person had tweeted out, and all part of the recycler view object. Okay, and that describes this process. Okay, so that was number 5. That was our data adapter. So once again, we have the data set, number 1. Number 2 is our recycler view object. Number 3 is our layout, which describes one cell. Number 4 is our layout manager, which organizes it into a view. Number 5 is going to be our data adapter, which adapts the data, exactly what it sounds like. And now for number 6, this is the final component of a recycler view. The final component is going to be our view holder. The view holder has returned. So remember how we were talking about, that's what makes a recycler view so efficient, so much faster than a lot of other implementations, is the view holder design pattern. So what is a view holder? So all we've talked about so far about the view holder is that it avoids excessive calls to find view by ID. So that's all we've said about view holders. Let's talk about what it actually is. So a view holder is a class that holds info for the data of a cell. So you can sort of think about it as like a prototype for a cell, and this prototype holds metadata for the cell. So maybe it's like for the example of tweets, right? We have to have tweet text. So the view holder will have the metadata for the text, for the tweet text. And so, and maybe every tweet has text, a like button, and a retweet button. So it has these three things. So within our view holder class, we will define that there is a text field, there is a button, and then there is the other retweet button. So this view holder is something that will help us avoid making excessive calls to find view by ID, find view by ID. It's sort of like a container that we can use. It's sort of like a prototype that we can use to take a look at how the general form of a cell will be. And once again, I'm emphasizing that the view holder is a class. Okay, so that was our 6 components of a recycler view. And just to reiterate, a lot of this is on the implementation side. We'll see that it's really just a lot of boilerplate code that you will end up finding on like the Android developing docs or on the course textbook. And no one ever really memorizes this stuff unless you're like a real like Android veteran, I guess. But just to reiterate, number 1, what is it? Data set. Yes. Number 1 is our data set. We can't do any of it without the actual data. Number 2, what is it? It's the Recyclerview object. Okay. Now, if you want, you can pause, but I'm going to keep going. But try to answer it before I tell you what it is. Test your knowledge. Number 3 is the layout, right? And the layout is what describes a single cell, the single tweet, okay? And the views of that single tweet, okay? Number 4 is our layout manager. It delegates that this layout goes here, this layout goes there, and organizes all of the layouts into a view, okay? Then we have number 5, our data adapter. This adapts the data, exactly what it sounds like, to the recycler view, and is constantly adapting new data as it's coming into the cells. And now number 6 is our view holder. This is the key to Recyclerviews that makes it so efficient, and it's a class ultimately that holds info for the data of the cell. You can think about it as sort of like a prototype. Okay, that was the 6 components of a Recyclerview. Okay, next we're going to be talking about how it is that you would even be able to implement a Recyclerview. Okay, so bear with me. This is a sort of cumbersome process, but like I said, a lot of this is boilerplate code, and you'll see it in action during the demo today. So the first step is to add the support library to our build.gradle. You can think of this as sort of like importing. So imagine you're creating a Python program and you have a library that you need to use like Turtle. At the top, you would say import Turtle, right? Because you're importing that package. Well, for us, the Recyclerview is sort of big and contains a lot of things, and so it is not built into the Android standard library. So we need to go to our build.gradle, and be careful, there are 2 build.gradles, which I know, how convenient, thanks Android. But we need to go to the build.gradle that has something that says implementations, curly bracket, and then close curly bracket. And we're inside of there, you will see implementation this, implementation that. And if you need the exact line of the implementation, please see the course textbook. But it's going to be what you need to put there to say, hey, for this entire project, give me access to this thing, to this Recyclerview thing. And on top of that, this is just a good skill to know, because maybe on your hackathon project, you're going to want to use some third-party libraries, and to do that, you have to put it in your build.gradle, implementation, etc., etc. And after you put it in, it won't work until you sync the Gradle, so make sure that you sync the Gradle afterwards. Okay. Additionally, after we add the support library for a Recyclerview, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add the Recyclerview to our layout file. So this usually looks something like, in our XML file, we're going to have a tag that says androidx.recyclerview.widget. Now capital Recyclerview. And then the tag will look like any other sort of view. And this is just to say that we have this physical Recyclerview in our layout, right? This is the Recyclerview in Twitter describes the entire list, right? The container for the lists. So if the infinite list, it's this, right? Maybe you have something on top, it's something below the infinite list, but the infinite list is still this big. Maybe I wanted to make it smaller, maybe I wanted to make it bigger, but what's described in this view is going to be our Recyclerview. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to add the actual recycler view to our class file. So the first thing is we just added it to our XML file. And like we said before in previous lectures, class files and or activity and class files and XML files are bound together. They are linked. And so we need to find the view by ID of the actual recycler view. And we'll do that in our class file. And then we need to get a layout manager. So remember, what is a layout manager? What did we say? So a layout manager is what organizes it into the view, right? So it makes sense that we would be doing that after just finding the view that we had just created in the XML file. So typically you will be using a linear layout manager just because it's easiest and there's already so many moving pieces going on with a recycler view that it's just best to use the linear layout manager. Follow the example code as given on the textbook. Then you need to specify your custom data adapter. So for different data sets, you need to adapt the data differently. Twitter's data adapter will look different than Facebook's data adapter, which will look different from a podcast app's data adapter. So they will all be very different, and different data sets require different things. So you will need to specify the adapter having already created the adapter. So once again, a data adapter will be specified after you've created said data adapter. And how do you specify the data adapter? Well, you call on the constructor and give it the argument of your data set. So what that's saying is, hey, create a new data adapter from the specification that I gave you, and then use it on this data set that I have. Okay, and then now you actually, so now let's talk about what that means. What does it mean to actually create your custom data adapter? So first off, you need to have a constructor for your data adapter. So maybe I'm calling it my adapter. I need to have something so that it can take in that data set and then create an instance of the data adapter. Okay, so the constructor, just like how we know classes have constructors from what you've learned about Java and things like this. Okay? Then you need the custom view holder. Once again, what do we know that the view holder does? View holder was component number 6. It was the one that you can sort of think of as a prototype for our data for for the data for the cell. So a prototype of what it should be. Okay, so we need to create our custom view holder, and then we need to implement certain functions. Oncreateviewholder is one of them. So what Oncreateviewholder is responsible for is for setting the correct view holder for a given item. So once again, the view holder is like that prototype. You have to give it the right prototype for that item. Every item has a specific prototype, right? So for some tweet, I want to give it the text tweet prototype. For an image tweet, I want to give it the image view holder, and sort of things like this. The other thing is Unbind view holder. So what is this function responsible for? This function sets the view for things in a view holder. So remember, think back to what a view is from our previous lecture. What is a view? We've seen different examples of views. So it sets the view for things in our view holder. So okay, if maybe I had some text, I'm probably going to want to set that text from the view holder to a text view and things of this nature. So that's what the Unbind view holder function is responsible for. Okay, and then the last piece that we need to create in implementing this custom view holder is the getItemCount. So the getItemCount function is basically just responsible for keeping track of the size of our recycler view. So it's typically just going to be the size of our current data set. And if our data set is a list, it's very easy to find the length of a list. There are built-in functions that we can use to do such things. Okay, so this describes the implementation of a recycler view. So imagine now, I want to define something so that when I click on a tweet, it behaves a certain way. Our typical on-click listener would not work for a cell of the recycler view because of the fact that it's a sort of custom data type that we are adapting with our custom data adapter. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to implement an overridden, right? We're providing our own implementation of something like an on-click listener or any other input listener or any other input event listeners, right? So depending on what our cell is, you might have different overridden methods, but for us, running with this example of a tweet, right? When you click on it, you're going to want an on-click listener specifically to handle that action. So the first thing you're going to need to do to define is you're going to need to define your own on-click function in an interface. Okay, so I know this is throwing around a lot of words. Let's break down. Interface. What is an interface again? Let's remind ourselves. So an interface is sort of like a class, except the functions are abstract, meaning that they don't have implementations. So the implementation of the function is done by the person later on. But in the interface, we just describe what the function is. And then the function will later be implemented by the user of the interface. So just a reminder, if you were unfamiliar with what an interface is, but consult the 2110 curriculum. I believe there's a really good hypertext entry that you could look at, or the internet has some good stuff. But once again, this is knowledge that we want to have in our programming vocabulary, even though I know it does not come up all that much, which is why I was trying to give a little bit of a quick reminder. So we're going to define our own on-click function within the interface, right? So once again, this does not mean we're going to be providing an implementation just yet. The implementation for our custom on-click comes at the end. This is us just defining that we have an on-click function within this interface, and we can provide it with with whatever arguments we need. So, but we want to give the position as an argument. So I want to know that the position in my recycler view is 3, so that I know it's number 3, so that that way when I'm getting the data, I know to look at element number 3, maybe from my data set, or however I've organized my data adapter. Okay? So running with this example of the tweet again, right? I'm going to want to pass in the argument of the position, so that I know if I clicked on tweet 3, I should then display the text of tweet 3 in a larger view. Okay, so that's the first thing we needed to do. We needed to define our own on-click function in the interface. Okay, then we need to override the default click listener in our own custom view holder. Once again, what does the view holder do? It was number 6 of our components of a recycler view. Think about it as your sort of prototype, right? This is sort of like your class that holds info for the data of the cell. So we are going to be overriding our default click listener in the view holder. So remember, view holder is a class. So within this class, we will be overriding the click listener. Okay, so then number 3 is now finally going to be the final step. In the activity itself, maybe it's our main activity or an HSV activity like we did in homework 3, we're going to actually there provide the implementation for our overridden on-click listener. So this is where we will be implementing the function as defined in the interface from step 1. Okay, so these are all of the steps involved in overriding your own on-click listener, and this process can be done for any input listeners, event listeners, things of the nature. So once again, just to recap, we defined our own on-click in the interface, which we provided that function definition with the position argument, which you could provide any arguments you need depending on your case scenario. But once again, we defined the function, we did not implement the function. Step 2 was us overriding the default on-click listener in our custom view holder, which remember, our custom view holder was element 6 of our components of Recyclerviews, and it was a class that holds info for the data of each cell, and metadata specifically. And step 3 was us actually implementing it in our activity, maybe our main activity, whatever activity we want to have the implementation for this on-click listener in, and that is where we provide the implementation, regardless of whether we're going to use it or not. Okay. Thank you guys for sticking with me during the lecture. I know it was a tough lecture this week, but you guys are doing great. And believe me, when you get to the actual implementation, you'll find a lot of it is just boilerplate code. I know it can be intimidating, but we're so proud of you for getting as far as you did. And if you ever need help, please reach out to us. Even if it's very late at night, or if it's very early in the morning, we have a course staff that's very dedicated to wanting to help you learn. Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Jesse, who's going to be doing the demo for this week, which is going to be very important. because we'll be going over the recycler view in action. Okay.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first week of Android development. This is Jessie and we'll be learning about Recyclerviews this week. So Recyclerviews are really helpful if you are making apps like a chat app, maybe like a music app like Spotify or any search engine you will be needing Recyclerviews. It basically helps you to put a lot of data with similar format altogether. So the first thing you need to do is go to the Gradle of the module and import a library for Recyclerviews. Here's the code for it. I basically copied it. Is implementation, which is basically similar to like import, and this is exactly what the Recyclerview library address is. And you say sync now, and now it is imported. And after that, the first thing you need to do is create a data class. Actually, it's not Java, it's colon. So create a data class for whatever. So remember, like in a recycler view, you will have a lot of similar formatted data, and those data need to have like similar attributes that is shared between them. For example, you can have in like a chat app, you can have like avatar, a picture like a profile picture, and like names, some like recent sent text, and those are three shared attributes between all of the basically like similar formatted items. So we need to create a data class for that, and each of our basically recyclable items will get data from the data class. So in this case, we will create a recycler view of different colors, and let's just call this data class color cube. So you add data in front of class, and it's different from a normal like activity class. It uses a parenthesis like this instead of a bracelet, versus parentheses. So inside the parentheses, you can name the attributes that you want the data class to have. In this case, we might say whether or not the color cube is checked. So we would like a recycle view of a set of color cubes and maybe like a checkbox in front of it and whether or not they're checked. So the second attribute we could have is maybe like it needs to tell us what color it is, right? So let's say color, and let's make it a string. Oh, between this we need a comma. Like between each of the parameters, you need a comma. It's similar. It's kind of like a constructor. So the third thing that you need to do is build a customized cell layout for each of the item. This is also one of the benefits for Recyclerviews. Um, there are many items in the list, right? But you don't have to create a layout for every one of them. You can just create one layout and then use them for all the items. This is why the inputs need to be somewhat similar in formatting. For example, in this case, each cell need to have a color and maybe a checkbox to represent the cell. Maybe you can also have a text view to tell you like what exactly is the color in hex. So let's start doing that by creating a new layout. Um, okay. Let's say we want to start with a checkbox. And it actually already contains the text, so we don't need an extra text field for it. We can use this text to like it will show the color in hex string. This is marked red right now because we remember we need to constrain it because this is the constraint layout. Let's constrain it to the top of parent and to the start of parent. We will leave the text for blank right now, and we will fill it up in the actual programming part, like the actual code. And let's add a margin to the front because I feel like it's a little bit too like close to the front, like the start of the layout. Say 20. And oh yeah, it needs to be left, not start, because of the API level I set it that's kind of low. If I set it to like something like 20, I can use start. It's basically the same. Like margin left is the same to margin start. The second thing we need to add is similar to you guys' second and third homework. We just add a color square, and let's just use view for now. And let's say maybe 40 dp. And remember, we also need to constrain it. Instead of constraining it to the start of parent, in this case, we will constrain the view to the end of the checkbox. Actually, let's just constrain it to the end of the parent. It might look better. And whenever, this is just a small tips, whenever you want to close the tag, you can just click backslash and it will just complete everything for you. And let's also give it some margin, some padding in the end. Oh, it should also be right in this case. And let me just expand this a little bit so you can see better. Let's then give it a background color. Default it to, I guess, black for now. Let's also give it a margin on the top. Okay, now it kind of looks all nice. So each of the items in the Recyclerview will have kind of something similar to this. You can change the text for the checkbox, and you can also change the color. You can also change the color for this color cube, and you can also change whether or not the checkbox is clicked. That's something you can change according to my design, and it's kind of exactly corresponding with the data class, except you can use this color string for both of the text for the checkbox and the actual color for the color square. Okay, now we're going to the most important part of building a Recyclerview. Is that you're going to build an adapter that connects the data. Your data will be in a list. Your main activity will be passing a list to an adapter. The adapter basically will connect this list of data with your like layout with the cells that you made basically, and form it to a Recyclerview as a whole. So you create a new colon class, and let's just name it color adapter. To start off with this class, you actually will need to like enter the name of the class, and the first parenthesis is basically going to contain whatever this adapter takes as an input. So as I said before, the adapter is supposed to take a list of data that your main activity will be given to you. So the input will be a private data set, and let's just call it like my data set or something like that. Oh, it's not data. It's not gonna be in the data set. It's not gonna be in the data set class. It's going to be a mutable list. A mutable list is basically like exactly the same for every list in Java. Okay, so inside this parentheses that we just create, is telling you what kinds of parameter does the color adapter take. After the parentheses, we'll have it followed by a column. A column basically kind of means extend in Java. It basically tells you what the color adapter extends to, like what's the parent of this color adapter, because we cannot build color adapter out of nowhere. Android Studio already have a pre-built a built-in Recyclerview adapter. It's just not as customized as we want. It supports like really simple function, and now we want to make it more complex. So let's just say it extends Recyclerview.adapter, and this original Recyclerview adapter it takes in a generic type of some sort of view holder. A view holder is the class that directly connects the data you pass in the data file, like the data class. It directly connects the data to the layouts for each of the color, like for each of the color items. So you basically directly pass in the data over here to your layout. So we are going to create a view holder ourselves because everything is customized basically, and it's going to be no, color adapter dot. Let's just name our view holder color view holder. It will mark red for now because we have not implemented it yet. Actually, let's just call it view holder. Okay, so let's first create an view holder class for the color adapter. Okay, so basically what does this holder class do is connecting this code with the layout that you just created for the item. So first of all, it says internal constructor because it's kind of like an internal class. Is it like an inner class for Java? So um it basically like this is where you find all of like the components that you created for each of the item layouts. So I just realized I have not set ID for the view, and let's do it now. Color square. And let's just variable square view item view dot find view by ID. Now you may wonder what item view is. It's basically item view is basically each of this layout. So you can use item view to find each of the components inside this layout. Now you will still see that this method says you have not implemented every basically functions that you need to implement. So for your convenience, you don't have to like write every code by yourself. you can just click implement members and it will basically set up the functions that you have not implemented for you. The first method we need to override is the Uncreateviewholder method. This method is very similar to the Uncreate method inside activities. It basically inflates the customized layout you created here to the view group that we just created. Okay, so basically what this does is trying to get the layout as a view from with just the ID of this layouts basically. So you don't need to really understand what is going on here for now. This is just you need to just like memorize this part of the code. But the only part you need to know is for this, like for the first parameter of the inflate method, it needs to be r.layout dot the ID of this layout. And with the layout inflator method, like with the layout inflator class, it will be able to return a view for you that you can use to fulfill the first parameter. Actually, it's the only parameter for the view holder class. Okay, the second method you need to implement is the unbanned. The second method you need to implement is the unbind view holder. It basically assigns values for each of the component inside the layout you just created. For example, you will assign value for the text. You will assign value. It will assign the color for this color square, and it's also the place where you set unclick listener. Basically, what happened if you click like let's say if you click the whole item or if you click like part like small part of like each of the item. For example, if you just click the color square, what will happen? So all of this takes place here. And for the parameters of the Unbind view holder method, it takes in a view holder that contains each of the components referenced here, and you can like reference them directly by calling holders dot square or holder like statue, let's say status check. And one more thing I need to correct in the beginning is actually not a mutable list of string. It should be a mutable list of color cube as the data type that you created. So each item in the mutable list should be a color cube that contains information about whether or not the checkbox is checked and what color is in the color square. If you say like private variable here, it basically um is not only a parameter for this color adapter, it's also a class attribute. So you can use mDataset wherever you want in this class. So let's try to let's try to give attributes for status check and the color square. Okay, so let's look at it one by one. So the mutable list, a small difference between mutable list and array list is that for colon, you don't have to use get like and with the index. I mean, you can do that, but it will give you like a simpler version. It's just replace it with a simple bracket basically. And you can use a bracket and have an index inside of it to get specific item in the mutable list. So the unbanned view holder basically has two parameters: the holder and also the position. So it knows like which position it needs to get the data from. So it matches each of the data in the list which with the corresponding position in like the Recyclerview. So it first find the exact item in the corresponding location, and it calls it for the color, and we will set like status check to the color, and we'll set is check or not to is check. And last but not least, we set the background color of the color square to the color that we found in the color cube. Okay, so we also said that you can set unclick listener for the item or each components inside of the item layout. So how you could do it is that you can call holder the item view set unclick listener. This is for the entire item layout, and you just do whatever you want here. It's similar to what you guys have been doing in the past. What if you want to have an unclick listener for, let's say, like the color square? And what if this is just for demo purposes? Whenever the color square is clicked, let's just make it white. Doesn't matter what original color it is. Okay. Um, we will have this for now, and then you will see what it will look like after we have implemented the whole thing. So the last method you need to implement in the adapter is the get item count. You basically need to return how long the recycler will actually need to be. So in this case, it will be the length of the data set you have here. So we just return m dataset dot size, and let's just return it. And we have adapter. Okay, now we have adapter fully implemented. Let's first create a recycler view in our main activities layout. let's say it's match parent, and it's a constraint layout, so we would like to constrain it to the start of parent and constrain it to top of parent. We also need to add ID for the Recyclerview. Let's just call it Recyclerview for now. Going back to the main activity, we need to create a reference of the Recyclerview that we just created. Recyclerview equals to, let's say, find view by ID Recyclerview. Okay, in the final integration process, you need to mainly have three things in the main activity or whatever activity that you want your Recyclerview to show up. So there are three things. The Recyclerview reference, which I've already created, the Recyclerview adapter that I created here, and I will need to call it soon. And one of the last thing is the layout manager. The layout manager basically tells you whether you want your items to be oriented vertically or horizontally. You can have a Recyclerview that you can swipe this way too. In this case, we will just have it show up vertically. This layout manager basically says that the Recyclerview is going to be swiped vertically. You don't have to have the last part of it. If you don't set anything, it's just going to be default to the vertical orientation for swiping. And now we have initialized a color adapter. And let's actually call the constructor, and we need to give a color constructor an input, and let's just call it like m dataset for now, and we will populate it. Last but not least, we need to tell the Recyclerview that your adapter is the color adapter that we just set it, and your layout manager is the layout manager that we just created. After that, the Recyclerview should be successfully set up. Actually, let's just make it also a class variable instead of a local variable. It's better because you might want to change the data in Recyclerview in different other method, and it's better to just have it as like a global variable instead. Oh, since we already set the type, we actually don't need to set the type again here. Last thing we need to do is we have to populate the m dataset. Okay, I fast forwarded this adding process since it's tedious and it's basically doing the same thing. It's basically adding each of the object of the data class and just assign it with different values. And let's just test it and see how it actually looks in the application. Oh, before that, we also forgot to initialize the mutable list. Actually, instead of saying late initialize, we will initialize it right now. So we set it equal to mutable list of, which create an empty mutable list. Also, instead of match parent, the height of the color item layout should be wrap content. And let's also add a little padding to the bottom of this color square. Actually, let's just make it 5 and 5. And let's just run it again. Okay, so here we have the Recyclerview. Each of them has the color index, and each of them has the true or false checked respectively. At this point, actually, the Recyclerview is kind of short, so it seems like it's not scrollable, but if you make it long enough, it's actually scrollable. So remember in the color adapter we said if any of the color square is clicked, it's going to be changed to the color white. Let's say like if you click any place over here, it's not going to change anything. However, if you click the color square, it's changing. It seems like it's disappearing, but it's actually changing the color score to white. And thank you guys for listening. Have a wonderful week and good luck on your prelims.